It's Brad here from etrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Roadmaster diode wiring on a 2025 Ford Escape. And this is going to be available in a few different configurations. You can get it with the wiring and the diodes, but if you need an umbilical, you can add that into the kit, and there's a variety of umbilicals that you can get. And also, you can get this with or without a 6-pole, so it's a good chance to really get all of the components you need if you don't already have them, or if you're not picking up a tow bar that sometimes includes those. And really the basics of diodes is it's going to be a one-way electrical check valve, and that way you can send signals from your 7-way through the umbilical to the 6-way and eventually back to your taillights, and it's not going to backfeed the wrong way. So that's really all the diode does, is just make sure that electrical goes one way and it's not going to damage any of the electronics. When it comes to flat towing any vehicle and even your Ford Escape, there's going to be 5 main required components that you need. Sometimes there's going to be additional things depending on the vehicle, and on this vehicle, that additional thing I'll just tell you now is going to be a charge line. Definitely add that in. It's a nice easy way to trickle charge your battery so it doesn't die. But as far as the basic components, you're going to need a base plate, and that's going to be the structural mounting point that bolts up to the frame of the vehicle and allows you to hook up the rest of your flat tow components and safely tow it down the road. And that connection point from your base plate to the RV so you can tow it is going to be your tow bar. And with our tow bar, just like pulling a trailer, you're going to have safety cables, not safety chains, but same thing. It's going to keep everything together just in case something was to get disconnected. Going along with that, a braking system is going to be something required, and that's going to be either a portable system or a fixed braking system. Whatever one you end up going with, they're both going to have a breakaway cable. And this is going to be the last line of defense. If everything was to fail, it's going to pull this cable and apply the brakes on the vehicle, bringing it to a stop. That way it's not rolling down the road. Diode wiring is going to be light signals that are transmitted from the taillights on the RV, including your running lights, turn signals, and brake lights, from the 7-pole through the umbilical to the 6-way and eventually to the taillights on your vehicle. No longer do you really see magnetic tow lights much anymore, and a lot of braking systems are going to require tapping into those diode wiring, so it's definitely worthwhile. Beyond that, we do have an air cable on ours today because we have air brakes, so we did the Demco Air Force 1, so that's why you see this blue cable. But those are going to be the requirements that you'll need to get this flat towed. Diode wiring really isn't that hard to get installed. It really just comes down to running the wire to the back and tapping it into the taillights. But a few things you want to take into consideration is what braking system are you using? Some of them will tie into that diode wiring and use those signals to apply the brakes. Today we're using an Air Force 1 from Demco, which really just relies on air pressure. So with that being said, we're not going to be tying into those diodes, but I like to pull the length up into the engine bay. That way if we ever needed to change out the plug, or if we ever converted to a different braking system, we'd have that excess. So what I did is I just zip tied a length of wire along with my charge line. If you're putting a charge line on this vehicle, which I do highly recommend, you're going to want to do this at the same time because eventually these will go into the same plug. Now our base plate is a blue ox, and the way that they mount up the 6-pole is you put it on the bottom of the fascia and it'll run out through there. A lot of times I like to get everything mounted up before starting to get that fascia back up. That way we can get all of our wires ran clean. So I'm going to leave mine long here, and once we put the fascia back on, we'll be able to run that out, get our plug mounted, and then we can get that all in place, which I will show you a little bit later. So what I ended up doing was starting to route this up into the engine bay. So I utilized the base plate, that's why I have the zip ties here, to just run those wires and then make my way up. There's a nice opening here, and I was able to just run those wires through just to kind of keep that in place. And then as we follow this up, you'll see our charge line. I just have our circuit breaker over here. You can kind of mount it wherever. And I'm going to hang tight on mounting that up to 12-volt power. That way it's not going to be arcing when we go to put our plug in. But the diode wiring, you'll see this is where I looped up. I'm not really having to loop a ton here, just again because we're not going to be tying into that braking system. But you'll notice that white wire, I ended up peeling it back quite a bit. In fact, I have quite a ton of excess, which is good because we'll be using this as a jumper for our running light signal. So I determined where I wanted to cut this by figuring out where we're going to ground it. And on the Escape today, and a lot of the Fords that are set up this way, you have a ton of factory grounds that you can work with. I see 4 of them right here, so you can really pick whatever one you want. Peel that white wire back, cut it, and then strip it. And the ring terminal that they include in the kit is not a large enough diameter for these ground screws to go through, so I did source another one that I have here. And so we'll get this ground attached, and that's going to ground up our electrical. Something that I like to do, you can really put the ground anywhere. I mean, you can put it underneath the vehicle if you want. I try to use factory grounds. I know that they work. And throughout the entire installation, I try to use the same grounds. That way, if we do have any electrical issues, we can troubleshoot it a lot easier. So we'll get our ground mounted up. And those screws are an 8mm, so if you need to take those out, you'll be using that socket. The rest of the diode wiring, I routed down towards the firewall, and just a fun fact, you can see the grommet. That's an oval shape back there, so if you're running things in and out of there for the braking system, that's the one you're going to want to use. But what I did was really try to keep this as tight to the firewall, so I went behind the danger Cheeto, as they call the hybrid wire, and really tried to tuck it back. And the reason being is we do have a sway bar down there, but we also have an axle, and we really want to make sure that wire's not getting wrapped around the axle. So throughout this whole process of running this back, really try to find spots that aren't going to be hot, they're not going to cut the wires, or they're not going to be around rotating parts that will damage them long term. So I fed this down and pulled out the slack. I'll raise up the vehicle and show you the rest of the path. Where I pulled the slack of the wires, I made sure that I was up over the sway bar, so it kind of goes in between this heat shield. Just make sure that you're up over the sway bar and you should be fine. You have an underbody panel that runs pretty well the whole length of the side of the Escape, so you can pull those 10mm nuts out and just tuck the wire in. You can do it under here, you can do it on the outside. Either way, this is going to make it a nice protected path, and you won't have to zip tie anything up. Just make sure that when you pull those nuts down, you pass the wire further back. That way when you tighten it, it'll keep that in place. This goes all the way back until we get to the back of our fuel tank, and that's where we start to split off our wires. So our yellow and brown, that's going to be our left turn signal and our running lights. So we keep those together. I split those off, went above the rear sway bar and onto this cross member, and then just ran this up over the arms so it's not going to get caught on anything, and then made my way over to the hole here right by our exhaust hanger bracket. I just zip tied this up, and that leaves our brown and yellow over here. And there's a grommet that's underneath here, just a small one, that we're going to be running this up. Normally we tap into taillights by pulling them out. On this vehicle, it's going to be a lot easier to do inside the vehicle. So eventually we'll be popping this out, but we're going to pull out interior panels before we get to that point. Now on the other side, we did pretty much the same thing with the green wire. I just routed this over and just kind of followed along, zip tying it up to make sure it's not going to make contact with the exhaust. And then I left it here where we're going to find there's another grommet. So once we have our wires in this situation, we have plenty to be able to pull up on both sides. We'll hop back up and we'll start taking off some panels to gain access to the electrical connections. So here in the hatch, you're going to want to take your cover off, and that way we have access to everything, because we're going to be pulling off the plastic panels. Our wires are going to be located in these pockets. And so in order to get these pockets pulled out, there's a few things that we're going to want to do. The first one being getting this threshold panel out. And there's 2 screws. There's one here and one on the other side. These are going to be a 7mm socket to get those taken out. So we'll get these removed. With those two screws taken out, we're going to be pulling off the threshold panel, and that's because it interlocks with all the plastics, but also when we run our jumper wire, that extra white wire that we pulled off the ground, we'll be able to run this nice and clean. It'll be completely hidden. So to pull this off, if you just kind of reach underneath the plastic and just pull straight up, there's a few clips. It shouldn't give you too much resistance, and then it's going to be a little bit underneath this weather stripping. So if you pull that out, you'll see the clips here. We'll set this aside for now. But we also need to get a little bit more clearance, and that's going to involve taking our jack out. So we just twist this handle. And we can set this aside. And then this foam, it is two pieces. We can pull this one out. It's just got some studs that it pops into. So if you reach underneath it and just pry up, there is this orange one here. This stud was pretty easy, so if the orange part comes out, we'll take that and put it back in. But for now, that should be enough space for us to start peeling back our plastic. And to get this up, same thing, we're going to kind of pull up on the bottom. This part snaps in, so just get this part up, and then as we pull this out, there is probably going to be some clips here, but just give it a little bit of pressure. And then that pops out. If you do have clips, the white parts come off the tabs. Just find that tab that it came off. Mine's up here, and those will just pop back in. That way it'll snap back in later. So if you want, you can take something to kind of keep this open for you while you're working. But this is going to give us access to our taillight plug. So if you go by the pocket and reach up where that taillight is, we'll get down, and this foam here is kind of in the way. We can remove this to make it a little easier. But our plug is going to be located right here. So what I'll do is I'm just going to separate our plug. There's a tab on the bottom, so if you just press that in, you'll be able to get that plug separated. And we'll be tapping into these wires. So what we need to do is strip back this insulation. That way we have a nice clean spot to cut, splice back our wires, and get our diodes in place. And the way I like to get this off, sometimes you can peel it if you're lucky, but it's not always the case. So I just have a small zip tie cutter, just enough to get this underneath. You can do this with a razor blade or even a knife. Just be careful not to puncture the wires. You know, we want to make sure that we're not opening these up and having raw wires exposed. So I'm going to peel this back to roughly, well, probably about to this zip-tied plastic holder. This should give us enough space to get our diodes in place. So I'll just trim this back. With that stripped back, normally you would test your plug to make sure that it's going to be the proper wires that you're cutting. I've went through and did that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So the two wires we're going to be tackling are the red and the green. So we'll just cut these. And I would suggest leaving a little bit of a length by the plug so it's not right there. And we're going to strip these back. I end up stripping these a little bit, about, I would say, a little over ½ an inch, just because they're small wires, and that allows me to fold them end over end to really get a good bite with those spade connectors. But we'll strip back all 4 ends first. And then we can grab our diodes, and we're going to start taking our spade connectors off, so it really doesn't matter which one you pull it from, but we need to make sure that these are the blue ones. There's going to be one yellow one. We're going to save that for our running light signal a little bit later. So as I said, give these a nice twist, and then I bend them end over end. That way that spade has a little bit more body to bite onto. And when doing any electrical connection, something I recommend doing is after you crimp it down, give it a quick tug. We want to make sure that it's not going to be a loose connection long term, and just tugging on it is going to make sure that we crimped it down properly. With those 4 spade connectors on, we can grab our diodes, and the out is going to face towards the plug. So that's just a single connection. So I'll plug in my green one here, And then we'll just put the other green one or the corresponding color onto the same diode. It doesn't matter which male connector you're putting it on, but that completes that circuit as far as our factory electronics, green to green, and this one will be red to red. So that leaves us with one extra opening on each diode, and that's where it comes into those wires that we ran, and we're going to get those pulled up. And I mentioned that grommet before. This one right here, we can pry this out. And this is going to be the hole that we pass our wires through. So I'll go underneath and I'll run our brown and our yellow wire up through there. And just pull up all your extra slack. Make sure that the excess underneath isn't touching the exhaust. Now we have quite a bit of excess here, so I'm still going to leave us a decent amount of length. That way it's not too taut by any means. So I'll cut this. And we want to make sure we're not just leaving that open where we pass the grommet. So I'm going to take our grommet and make sure that wire doesn't go back down and just poke a hole through it. So either a drill bit, or I'm just going to do an X pattern with my knife. And then we'll feed our wire down to where that grommet can seat back up. And later on, once everything's in place, if you want to, you can put a little bit of RTV silicone, and that's going to seal that up for you long term. We'll just pop this back in place. Now from here, we'll split these and just kind of peel back a length here. And we're going to strip back both of these ends, but now's a good time to also grab your white wire, because we're going to be tying that into the brown wire. So obviously we have tons of excess of this, which is totally fine and also might be helpful in some of your other components. But what we'll do is I strip back the white and brown a little bit longer. And we're going to wrap these together. And this is where that yellow spade terminal comes into play. Because it's a larger gauge, that's going to account for the two wires being put together. And this is going to be that jumper that I mentioned that'll run over to the other side. So we'll grab our yellow spade connector. And we can crimp that down. And then the yellow is just going to get that blue spade connector. And then connecting these, pretty easy. The red wire is our stop and turn. So that's where our turn signal comes into play. So we're going to put our yellow wire on the red wired diode. And these can get kind of tight, so just take your time and also make sure that they're sliding on, making a good connection. Sometimes you can slide that in between the plastic and the metal. It's not as good of a connection. And then from here, that white and brown, we'll just go to the green. So we've just essentially accomplished one side already. The rest of that white wire, it will run over to the other side. Something that I like to do just to kind of protect these long term is use electrical tape to tape this up, or zip tie the wires so that way there's no strain on the wires. It's not going to pull out of those spade connectors. We just want to protect them long term. Another option too is you can put RTV silicone around all of those connections, and that'll also seal it up. Once you're at that point where you're happy with it wrapped up, you can plug this back in. You can get your plastics put back in. Just make sure that you're running this white wire over, and then we're really just going to repeat the same process on the other side. And in fact, the colors are going to stay the same at red and green. So I'll get this all put together, and then I'll make our connections on the passenger side, and I'll show you how it looks. So I got our passenger side all hooked up, and let's take a closer look so you know how to route everything. So with that threshold panel, I did mention I'm going to run it along here and it'll be all hidden, but you want to make sure it's not going to be loose, but also not blocking any of the spots where it snaps in. So I did zip tie, there's these two circles here as well as over here, and that should keep everything out of the way. And then a little bit different, not completely different, but the plug is up here. So on this one, I ran the white wire up, I pulled my green wire through the grommet, but the way that the diodes are set up, you'll have an in and an out, and the out needs to go to the taillight. And normally on taillights you'll have a plug like this, so I just kind of unfortunately went directly to that, but the wire that runs up is actually going to the taillight. So when you're attaching this, you're going to put your green and your red, those factory colors, from the wire, not the plug side, on the out portion. And then from there, you'll just match color for color on the factory colors there, and then our white running light will go to green, and then our green wire is going to go to the red. The same holds true for the driver's side. Again, the plug side is not going to be, that's going to be where the in arrow is. So make sure that you get that properly set up. Everything leading up to this is accurate. I just had these flipped. And again, I just want to make sure that you don't run into the same mistake. So everything's hooked up in the back. The only thing that's left to do is get our 6-way all wired up, which is pretty simple to do, and then test to make sure that it's working before hitting the road. This is going to be one I mentioned earlier that it kind of slides through the fascia, and then we get this all mounted. So I'm going to get my braking system all installed, and we'll come back a little bit later and I'll show you exactly how to get this wired. Now, I got all of my braking system installed, and as well as the diodes up until the plug, and that's where it comes back to. We need to modify the fascia just a little bit for everything to go back together and for everything to mount up properly. First thing that we're going to be doing is trimming out a lower grill, and the slats that are on the outside we're going to cut, and that's going to allow those arms to go through. And the best way that I've found to do that is an oscillating tool. I really like how clean the cuts get on this, but really any cutting method that you have will work just fine. So we're going to cut out this section. We're going to leave these ribs here for now. The next thing we're going to need to do is get our bracket mounted up for our diode wiring, and the bracket's got a nice little bend to it. This is going to live right in between those plastic push pins. So as I hold this here, there's two slotted holes. I'm going to take a 1/4-inch drill bit and just drill out 2 spots. And this is going to allow us to grab hardware that's included in the kit to be able to bolt this up. So we just have some washers, a bolt, and a nylon lock nut. So we're going to get these all mounted up and tightened down on the back side. And then from here, you're going to want to grab your 6-pole plug, because we're going to hold this in place and figure out exactly where we're going to be trimming out to get a hole to pass those through. So with this tightened down, we're going to grab our 6-pole and hold this in place, and you're going to find that the boot is probably going to start making contact with the plastic, but that's going to show us exactly where we're going to want to drill a 5/8 hole. This is going to allow us to pass our wires through. So I'll get this drilled out. And so when we put our fascia on, we're going to just pass our charge line as well as our diode wiring through here, and then we can get our plug all wired up. So with that being said, we got everything trimmed out. This should get us to where we can slide this in place and get everything put back to order in the reverse order that we took it off. So make sure you get your electrical connections all put back together. If you haven't already put that black box and all of that configuration put back, you can go ahead and do that. Something that I've done, if you have air brakes, we're going to be doing an Air Force One on this, or we've already have, but that's where I've left this loose, because I do want to make sure that I get this mounted up properly. So I'm going to be mocking this up, making sure it fits well. So there's going to be going on and off a few times. Same goes for our breakaway switch. If you want to, you can mock this up and you can bend this either way to make sure that it clears. But from here, that's pretty much it. You're just going to make sure the fascia goes back on, and from there you can wire up your diode wiring, get everything in flat toe mode, assuming you have everything else installed, and then you're going to be ready to go. So I got my fascia all reinstalled, and what we did on this blue ox base plate is per the instructions. So we have our mounting bracket that's here, and we drilled a hole, and that way we can feed this through. I have plenty to be able to hook up to this, and I would highly suggest you doing the same. It'll make it a lot easier to get this all in place on the wires. So first thing that we're gonna do is determine how much wiring we really need. And also, if we have to, we can push any excess back up. So, you know, roughly in this vicinity, I might cut off about maybe an inch on each of them, and then we can split the wires up. So let's do that first. And your charge line is going to go into a taller port. As we look at the plug, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to cut this one just a little bit shorter. And we're just going to split these. And before we strip them back too far, to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, we'll take our 6-pole plug and the boot. We're going to slide this over our wires and just kind of put it out of the way. But that way it'll be ready for us when we get this all attached. I'll just put that there. Now, the way that this works is you have a few different receptacles where the wires are going to go, and it's just a small Phillips head screw that bites down onto that. So what we'll do is loosen up the ones that we're going to get our wires in. So the center one is going to be for our 12 volt. So when we back it out, don't take it out completely, just kind of to where it's flush on the bottom. If you drop these, they're really, really small, and a lot of times getting them back in is kind of tricky. So the wires are going to go in there, and then we'll tighten them down. There's going to be letters that are embossed on here that will tell you exactly where they need to go. But let me show you how to attach one, and then I'll get them all attached and show you exactly where each wire is going to go. So as we strip these back, generally about 1/4 of an inch or even less is going to be fine, because you don't want a ton of excess wire hanging out. That way, you know, it's not going to make contact with any of the other ones. So really just as enough to where we can get those in each spot. So we'll get these all stripped out. And once those are stripped, it's going to be as simple as getting them attached to the right spot. So our 12 volt is going to be this long, tall post in the center. So I slid that in. We'll just snug this down. Don't over tighten it because it can actually damage the wires. They can be brittle, but it should hold itself up. So from here, I'm going to work around putting these wires in the proper spot. So I'll get this and then I'll show you where they go. With these attached, starting at the 12 o'clock position, you're going to find TM, and that's going to be tail marker, and that's our running light. So that's going to be our brown wire. GD is ground, so that's white. LT is left turn, so that's yellow, and then RT is right turn, so that's green. Now, a few things that I like to do, just because this is on the bottom of the car, so anything you see splattered along here, this plug has the potential to be exposed to, and it's spring-loaded, so it should keep everything out of there, but we want to make sure that this connection lasts for a long time, and there's a few ways to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is grab some RTV silicone and just put it in all of these receptacles. That's going to keep it in place and keep water from getting in there and breaking down that connection. And once that's all coated up, next thing we'll do is slide our boot over the plug. And then I'm going to take some electrical tape and start taping around here. And this is just going to make sure that this is sealed up. No water is going to get in this way. And then I'll leave this attached. I'm going to grab the wire loom that's included and put it on our wires and feed it through the hole that we drilled and tuck some of it in here and then tape that up. That's going to make it look nice and clean, but also, again, keep water from getting in here. With all that taped up and nice and protected, you can feed back any of the excess up, and then we're going to bolt this onto our bracket. And all that's left to do is test to make sure that this is working. So if you have your umbilical handy, you can grab that. And you can use your RV to test it. We're going to be using a test box. It's going to simulate hooking up to the 7-pole on your RV, but you're going to want to run through all the light signals. So that's going to include your running lights, your turn signals, as well as your brake lights, and just check the taillights on the towed vehicle. That way we know that the diodes are working properly. Now, testing our lights, we're going to go through a certain sequence to make sure we're covering all of it. So you're going to probably want an extra set of hands here. That way they can check and as you run through the signals. So first thing we'll check is going to be our running lights. Next thing will be our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and then finally our brakes. Once you've determined that all of the lights are working properly, at this point, if you have all the rest of your components set up, you can get your vehicle all hooked up, get your vehicle in flat tow mode, and then you're ready to hit the road. So that's going to do it for a look and installation of the Roadmaster diode wiring on a 2025 Ford Escape.